We start off with a story. Gauteng Premier David Makhura is wagering his job to prove he's innocent of corruption. Makhura has been implicated in the illegal awarding of COVID-19 PPE tenders last year. He says he's willing to go before the ANC's Integrity Committee to clear his name and perhaps also prove that the accusations leveled against him are part of a smear campaign. His spokesperson, Vuyo Mhaga, joins me now live from Pretoria to discuss this matter further. Vuyo, thanks a lot for joining us this evening. Former Gauteng Health Department Chief Financial Officer in an affidavit at the Special Tribunal allegedly stated that the Premier David Makhura gave her the names of the companies to appoint to supply and deliver PPEs in the province, yet the Premier refutes this by saying that his office is implicated and not necessarily him. So the office is at fault, not him.
Yes, good evening, Faith and viewers of the ENCA. Now, if you go to the affidavit of which is it's a public document and also the Premier has actually read it. The former CFO does not say the Premier is implicated. He say among the people that should have sourced the names for PPE to be bought are people from the office of the Premier. And on this matter, the Premier has requested the SIU to actually look at who among the 350 people who are actually working in that department called the Office of the Premier exactly is doing that, because many people who are working there, men of integrity, women of integrity, who are actually working very hard to make sure that Gauteng is a better place. So you need to clear all 350 so that we are able to understand specifically who is actually the person. Unfortunately, then the judge will have erred in his final judgment to say the Premier, actually citing the affidavit. So that was really the clarity that we wanted to make. So the affidavit speaks about the office of the Premier, whereas the judge then actually conflate the issue to say he is the Premier.
But then that is in itself a problem, isn't it? Because that at a critical time in the country, money was looted from the office of the Premier without the Premier's knowledge. So in other words, looting happened under his watch in essence. It doesn't completely exonerate him, because if a thief breaks into your home and steals, why are you taking so long before anything actually happens? And where are your eyes at during that time?
No. Maybe, Faith, let me reiterate again. The money is not stolen from the office of the Premier. So the former Chief Financial Officer says, among the areas that I sought the names from were the national database, was the provincial database, was the office of the Premier, was the office of the MEC. Other people came to me direct, other people came from the department. So it's people who are actually referring companies to her as the CFO in the Department of Health. So not in the office of the Premier, but people who are working in the office of the Premier will go from that department to the Department of Health to give the names to the CFO. This is exactly why the Premier is then written to the SIU through Ms. Valin, and actually the SIU has actually acknowledged that they'll actually investigate who among the 350 people who are working in that department called the Office of the Premier that approached the former CFO to actually give her the names.
However, Vuyo, if we have to be really honest with each other now, given the fact that these offices, these names of the companies were procured from the Office of the Premier, in other words, the referral in itself, these are the same companies where many of them are actually related to the PPE scandal. So whether or not money was directly or indirectly looted, it does not exonerate or take away from the fact that those names, some of them were acquired from the very same office of the Premier. Those are the names. The names came from the office that are related to the companies, some of those companies related to PPE fraud or PPE irregularities. So still, all of this happens under the guise, under the eye of the Premier of the province. And there is the problem, is it not?
No. Remember, we're talking about 350 people here. That will, any of them, or anyone actually among the 172,000 employees of Gauteng, will go to the CFO to say, among the names that you, can you please give the work is, it will be this. It will be extremely unfair to then expect the Premier to police 172,000 Gauteng employees, all including in this department of 350. That's why when that information comes, you don't sit back, you then say, can you please further do the investigation and give a body that is mandated to do that particular work, which at this instant is the SIU. And we are quite happy that the SIU has actually acknowledged and actually affirmed that they'll actually go to the bottom of it. But to then say, the Premier must know all 350, who are they interacting with. It will be really unfair. What is important, what then do you do after you have actually found out this is what is happening? And the Premier has really went to the SIU to say, please look into this, because it's not only him that is being implicated, but everyone who's actually working very hard to make sure that Gauteng becomes a better place for its residents, who actually their names are on the line. So we are not only clearing Premier's name, but we are clearing everyone in that particular office, because everyone who's working will remain a suspect up until we get to the bottom of it.
Unfortunately, time is not on our side, Vuyo, but I really want us to get to this matter very quickly. Does the Premier think that there is a smear campaign against him from those who are after him?
No, of course. He's a politician. It has always been the case. You'll remember some of the issues that he rebutted last year about some fellow called Hamilton. There's always been a thing about trying to remove the Premier from the political scene in Gauteng. And he's not perturbed. He's quite clear. He's very clear in his conscience. And he understands his oath that he's there in the service of the people, and he's there on the privilege given to him by the African National Congress. Hence, he's actually also presenting himself to the integrator of the ANC to actually explain his side of the story, to say, this is what has actually happened, this is my side of the story. But Premier is really placing his might to the service of people of Gauteng, and that's what he has always been focusing on ever since he came to the office in 2014.
Vuyo Mhaga, we'll leave it there for this evening. Thanks a lot for joining us. Gauteng Premier's spokesperson, that is, of course, David Makhura, spokesperson there, giving us the latest on that matter.